Welcome back. All right. So there's always the discussion of, THG roots for this team. He clearly hates this team. He's not rooting for this team. So, all right. All right. Let's hold my feet to the fire here a little bit. I used to do 1 through 32. I don't do that anymore because, generally speaking, from one night to the next, who I'd like to see win each game can depend on what the situation is. And so at the top, these are going to be the teams that I root for the most, and then it'll just be different tiers. This is as close as I can come to ranking them the way they used to. So it'll be teams I'm openly rooting for, teams that are, kind of rooting for, teams that I don't really. Yeah, you guys get the whole tiered thing, right? So the top ranked team, and of course I'm wearing Vancouver because they are number one. So I can go ahead and assign a number to Vancouver because they are the number one team that I cheer for most often. In that, since the early '80s, that's just been the case. And there's been some really tough times. There have definitely been moments where I've wondered whether or not I'd want to continue my fandom necessarily, but in the end, I have continued to root for the Vancouver Canucks. So they're number one. And number two, and I've explained this many times over, it's not a surprise to anybody. This is an interesting season, though, because while I am a fan of the Boston Bruins, I'm also keeping my eye to the future. And I do feel like this season they just don't have it, and I can't shake that feeling in my brain. So there's definitely part of me thinking, I want to see them win. I want to see them succeed. I also want that long term success. Missing the playoffs this year might not be the worst thing to happen to the team. So I don't get that upset when they lose. I generally have not been getting, because they've won 8 out of 19 so far this year. I just generally have not been that upset when they lose. Which brings us to number three, and that's Dallas. Now, what's interesting is that Dallas playing Boston this past week, I did find myself rooting for Dallas from a perspective that I did understand that Dallas was, at least I think, this season set up that they could win it. And so, and by it I mean the Stanley Cup. So I'm definitely, when Dallas and Boston have played for each other, I'm fine with Dallas beating Boston. I don't have an emotional connection to the game. I can just sit back and just watch it as a neutral observer. This is why when these teams play against each other, I'm very happy. Because it's like, all right, so whoever wins, wins, and I can just enjoy the game for what it is. This is why I know I'm a fan of all three teams, because that doesn't happen with any teams other than those three. Now, number four is where things get a little bit more difficult. Um, okay, so this season, and again, things do change from year to year. Who have I found myself rooting for? And I know they're on the board because I have everybody on the board. Do I know where they are on the board currently? Apparently not. Got everybody on the board though, don't I? Okay, did I use the old logo and I just can't find it? This is kind of funny. All right, so what I'll do instead, I got to figure out which team I've got on the board twice. Somebody's yelling at their screen right now. But fine. We'll put Winnipeg up there. Means I'm blind, is what it means. It's been Winnipeg. I've enjoyed watching Winnipeg this year. There's been people who've said, he just doesn't like the Jets. Okay. All right. But I do. I like the players on the Jets. Scheifele's one of my favorite players. Kyle Connor's one of my favorite players. I like Hellebuck a lot. Yeah, I would put Winnipeg fourth. Now, what surprises me is fifth. So the fifth place team absolutely is a huge surprise to me. And so, yeah, Anaheim, I would put in fifth place. We've gone to Anaheim enough times now. I've met with people from the Anaheim organization enough times that I want to see this team do well. I want to see Alexis Downey talking about it, a 10-game winning streak. I want to, next time that I exchange emails with somebody from their office, I want the conversation to turn into, and how about how well we're playing? So yeah, Anaheim is up to that point, and I don't know how I feel about that, because then that slots Ottawa into sixth place. Ottawa, I have enjoyed watching them play for years, but it is not easy right now with Ottawa, because just that one step forward and then two steps back that they do. All right. Seventh, and again for this year, who do I find myself rooting for? Yeah, Buffalo. Yeah, there's some disappointment here, isn't there? Buffalo, and again, it has been really difficult with Buffalo this year because again, it feels like it's the same story. They're good some nights. Some nights they look really good. Other nights, and that can be hard to watch. It can. And so I've found myself really rooting for them. Let's see, eighth. Nobody's gonna believe me with eighth. Nobody's gonna believe me that I do find myself rooting for the Toronto Maple Leafs at any point in time. So I would put Toronto in the top eight, and I think eight's fine. I think eight. I think that's where I can stop doing a countdown where I've got a numerical value to it. Would be Toronto. I'm as tired of watching Toronto lose in the first round as anybody else is who's a Maple Leaf fan. And I feel that way because I do report on it, and it gets a little bit tiring. Like, they're out again in the first round. Well, that sucks. It felt like they took that step forward when they knocked out Tampa, and then Florida just knocked them right out. But Florida, I'm going to put them first here. I don't have a problem with Florida. There was a point where Florida was number 4 on this list. So I don't have a problem with Florida. I don't hate Florida. I don't root for them like I used to, but I don't hate them. New Jersey, I will put in that category as well. This may end up being a popular category. The New Jersey Devils, I like seeing them succeed at this point in time. I would also say the Rangers could go into that category as well. And this is where it does get a little bit difficult for me to try to rank all of this because there are nights where I'll watch the Rangers win and go good for them, and other nights where I'm like, well, I kind of had hoped for the other team to maybe pull that off. Utah, I found myself rooting for here and there too. Hey, it's a brand new team, and I liked Arizona, so why not find myself rooting for Utah? Uh, Philadelphia, I'm going to put Philadelphia here, although I do respect Tortorella, and but I understand too this team's in a rebuild, so difficult for me to get all that emotionally invested. I would put the Islanders in that category too. Like, I don't have them down in this category. I'm not even sure if anybody's going to get down in that category, to be honest. But yeah, the New York Islanders, I don't find myself openly rooting for them. They do have a different style of play, though. One thing that I do enjoy about watching as much hockey as I do is every team has its own personality when it comes to how they dictate the game. And when you're watching a game and you're like, hey, this matches their personality, you find yourself just, being kind of impressed when a team's setting the tone. There's the problem. I got 2 Columbus magnets on the board. That's what I did. I put 2 Columbus magnets on the board. Well, we'll keep this one, and I'll take this one, put that one on the desk. So that's what I did. That's why there wasn't a Winnipeg. Columbus, I have found myself rooting for them a bit. I do have the flag, so if they did make the playoffs, Columbus flag goes up at the start of the playoffs over top of these, where these are now. But I don't know if that's going to happen because lately they've started to look very similar to Columbus teams that have missed the playoffs for a while. Let's see. Tampa Bay. Do I find myself rooting for Tampa Bay is a question. And I would say no. I think the problem I have is this is an angry face. And I don't really have... I'm not really angry. Let me try to find something that's a little more suitable than that. Because angry is not the right term. I don't think Sully is one that, or Mike or Sully is one that works either. It's Mike. Yeah, alright. I'll put that one down there. Yeah, I'll put Mike down there. Because, again, it's not that I hate these teams or I'm all angry when they win. But do I cheer when they win? Not really. And it's usually teams that have won lately and don't really need the fan. It's almost like I go to the teams that I feel like need my support. thus some of the teams at the top of the board being where they are. But I'll put Tampa Bay in that category. I'll go ahead and put Vegas in that category as well. Not openly rooting for, I would put Pittsburgh in that category as well. Montreal not. And what's funny is that there was a time where Montreal would have been right at the bottom, and they're not anymore for me. And maybe part of it is that they've been rebuilding the last few years, and I did find myself kind of proud of them for that run in the 2021 playoffs all the way to the final. So there's that. LA. I mean, since our last trip to not our last trip, our last February trip to Anaheim, and again meeting Kings fans, meeting the anthem singer for the Kings and talking to her for a while. It's that kind of interaction that the channel's provided me with, and honestly, if not for the channel, Anaheim would be right down near the bottom still. The channel has definitely impacted. So at the end of this, I'll do a little bit of a bonus for all you fine people on the internet too. Minnesota, I'm going to put in this category. I don't find myself actively rooting against them. I don't find myself necessarily actively rooting for them, but I'll put them in that category. Carolina, yes. Carolina, I was very actively rooting for at one point not too long ago. And again, it feels like they're a better team. They're playing better. They don't really need my fandom. They don't really need it. Not that any of them do. I don't think there's any team that's going, oh, I hope. Although Anaheim has openly admitted that they're trying to bribe me into becoming a fan, and as you can tell, it's kind of working. Edmonton. You know what? I kind of see Edmonton in between this region. They're not down here, and as much as Oiler fans think that I have them down here, and I hate the Oilers, and how dare they knocked out Dallas and Vancouver? Are you kidding me? If I had to hate every team that's knocked out Dallas and Vancouver, I would hate 90% of the NHL, which I get accused of. So, I'm torn in between these two. I'll put them down here. It feels like this column doesn't have enough. Seattle, I don't find myself rooting really for or against Seattle. So I'll put Seattle in that category as well. That doesn't bother anybody. Washington, I honestly find myself kind of hoping that Washington not only makes the playoffs but does well. Washington was a tough watch last year, and so it definitely impacted how much I was rooting for them, because I want the playoffs to be maximum entertainment. And so when a team is playing not very entertaining hockey and it looks like they're going to make the playoffs, I always have that fear that they're going to be successful in the playoffs and that other teams are going to go, hey, we can do that. And next thing you know, we're back to the 90s all of a sudden when it comes to scoring. Late 90s, not early 90s. Early 90s was bonkers. Nashville, I don't really find myself rooting for Nashville. Nashville's just kind of in that bottom area. Again, it doesn't mean I'm angry when they win. And I don't. And this is the thing I try to explain to people when I'm doing review videos. I'll see the comments of, THG's clearly angry tonight because X team won. I am. Once you're covering hockey like this, it all just kind of blends together at times. It becomes this thing you're watching that you don't get as emotionally invested in. Come playoff time, yes. Playoff time, yeah, absolutely, I can get very emotionally invested. Calgary, now let's see. I've got Edmonton on that line. I do root for Calgary when they're against Edmonton, and I do find myself rooting for Calgary more than most Canuck fans do, I believe. And I think that's been the case for a long time. So while I get mad at certain series between Calgary and Vancouver, 89 stands out as one that I was definitely mad about, I don't hold on to that. It's the same reason the New York Rangers are where they are. I don't hold on to that. I can separate my fandom of a team from teams that beat that team I'm rooting for. I wasn't always able to do that. That definitely was a problem I had back in the day, but I can do that now. Chicago, I don't find myself... You know what? I don't know if Chicago belongs down here anymore. I don't know that they do. I know there's a lot of people that don't like the Chicago Blackhawks. I totally get some valid reasons why people don't like the Chicago Blackhawks. At this point, I don't have Chicago in that area. I kind of find them in this area, and if they can surround Bedard with some players that I really, really like and root for, Chicago could end up moving up the list a little bit more than they have to this point. Detroit, I do enjoy a Detroit broadcast, and I think the team is probably better than their record right now. I know that may not make Detroit fans very happy, but I think they are. And I say not very happy because I think this team's been better than the record for a while, and they just barely missed the playoffs last season. I still think if they had won that tiebreaker and made the playoffs, we'd be having a different conversation about Detroit. I think a lot of the Yzer plan doesn't work discussion would just be gone. So we're down to San Jose, Colorado, and St. Louis. This is an interesting 3 teams to be down to be honest. Colorado, I would put them in the bottom row. Absolutely. Yep. And again, 2022 Stanley Cup, 2023 Stanley Cup, 2020 and 2021 Stanley Cup, 2016, 2017, 2009 Stanley Cup. And Nashville didn't win a Stanley Cup. And the interesting thing is I was rooting for them back in 2017 when they went to the Stanley Cup final. So this can absolutely change. It is subject to change. There was a time where St. Louis would have been right there. St. Louis, I do not feel like belongs there. I'm going to put them here. I mean, they're against Carolina as I'm recording this, and I'm asking myself, okay, so am I rooting for St. Louis or Carolina? I don't know that I'm rooting for either of them, but in terms of in general, I would probably root for Carolina over St. Louis. If it was a Stanley Cup final, yeah, I'd be rooting for Carolina. They've had their issues in the playoffs. I'd be rooting for them. The Sharks, I do not find myself hating on the Sharks. The San Jose Sharks and San Jose media and some of the San Jose fans that I've met in real life, I have a lot of respect for. And it does feel like that with our frequent trips to California, it is affecting my fandom of California teams. There was a time, yeah, San Jose belongs on this line too. There was a time where my most hated teams in the NHL were San Jose, LA, and Anaheim in any order. It didn't matter. They manhandled the Canucks. I hated watching games between Vancouver and any of them. I wouldn't even watch them. People at work would be like, hey, you watched the Canucks game last night. Well, where were they? Well, they were in Anaheim. So you know the answer to that. We've had this discussion before. So, yeah, there's definitely been some change from when the channel started. And again, this row here, I couldn't have an angry face because I don't get mad when those teams win. I don't actively root for them in situations. And again, I can say there are certain situations where I've rooted for these teams. And it is weird as a Boston fan to say that about Montreal, but I have. Up here, there are times where I'm actively rooting for these squads, and these are the ones that I have found myself this year cheering out loud for when they've won games. So if you're a Toronto fan watching this, I have absolutely cheered out loud when Toronto's won games. It has happened. I like Mitch Marner, and for all the negativity I see attached to Mitch Marner, I would be very happy to see him in Boston. I'd be very happy to see him in Vancouver or Dallas. I would welcome him on any team that I root for. I think he's a great player. So in the event that he leaves Toronto in the offseason, I'd be quite happy with him going to a team I root for. That would honestly be kind of fun. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. It's greatly appreciated. And again, these change from year to year. And that's why I don't do just like 1 through 32 anymore, because they change. So these are not in a particular order. These are not in a particular order. Neither are these because of that reason. But thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.